also join me. I know that we finished the 23 billion last year on compensation. That's for kids that were funded through the First Nations Child and Family Services Program from 1991 onward. Also for children that were impacted by the narrow application of Jordan's principle throughout those years, plus their parents. So it's probably 300,000 First Nations people that will be receiving compensation on that. The children plus their parents or their grandparents, their caregiving grandparents. So I know that there's big discussions to happen amongst families. I know certainly in every family's probably been affected. I know I have a close sibling that's his children have been affected through that, and big conversations around that. Got the 23 billion on one end. After that, I know we're talking about the long-term reform of 47.8 billion. It is a lot of money. I think that it can help us a lot. And I know that it's a big change from flipping all that money from the provinces towards First Nations control. And I don't think that we should be scared of that. I think, look at this, we're capable. We're capable of moving forward and away from government control always controlling us. And I think when people come to First Nations and they work with us, there'll be better results. And I want to thank your Chief Emmanuel from when he's in Ottawa. He comes and helps me. And I made him come with me to cabinet table because this entire negotiation was happening on the 47.8 billion. It wasn't at that, it was at 19.8 over 5 years. And I told Chief, I said, come join me. I need to go bug the Prime Minister and I need to go bug his cabinet. And we went to Parliament. I took him and two other chiefs, and I said, we need to do ceremony. We need to make sure that we're praying and that our elders are praying. And thankfully we came through with the $47.8 billion. And I think had we not done it, we're seeing the changing landscape. We need to try and secure that for the next decade ahead. And I know there could be some critics out there, but at the same time, I think let's take the good of this. And I think if there's things within the agreement that need to be changed, your chief is here, go through it line by line. It's a public document. If there's things on there that you want changed, this is your leader, and we'll put that in there. We'll make sure that that's in the resolution. We'll make sure that we pass that in a good way, and that we put let's try and fix the system. And over the next decade, it's not going to be fixed. I can tell you that right now. It's going to take us a long time. It took us a long time to get here. It's going to take us a long time to change that. But when I see the commitment in this room and the grandmother stepping forward saying, we have to move back to bringing our kids home. Because I come from a place where there's 12,000 kids in care in Manitoba. 11,200 of them are First Nation kids. They're not in our First Nations communities. They're paying mortgages down every street in Winnipeg, and in Regina, and in Vancouver, and in Calgary. And that bleeding system has to stop. It started at residential schools. It's got to stop with us here, and we're going to have to bring our people home, even though we're broken a little bit, because I'm a mom. I'm not a perfect mother. But if the boys and I, and my big girl and I, if we're struggling, help us through that. If I'm struggling on addictions, or alcohol, or maybe dysfunction within because of the day school that I attended, my parents attended. Thankfully we don't, we try and pray. I think in my mom and dad, even though they went through harms through my grandparents, through residential schools, I got up with my mom and dad because my mom was left on the reserve. Her white father and Indian mother kind of left her all over. But thankfully the old system kicked in where my great grandmother raised her, so she was raised within our family. And my dad who had it pretty rough growing up. He's chief growing up in my entire life, but I want to thank my parents because they gave me a violence-free and alcohol-free home, yet they never had it. And I'm thankful to them for that. And I'm thankful that I lived on the reserve and that we had our language and that we had our land like this. Like I was telling the chief today, I said, we'd play in the bush and we could eat choke cherries off the trees and we were okay. We knew that, right? And then of course I had to go to my grandmother's house 3 days a week, and she had made me pray on the floor for 30 minutes every night, and I'd be so irritated by it as a little girl. But I learned the language from there, and I learned patience, and I'm glad that I had my great grandmother who raised me up like that. And I kind of look back and I think, how did we not starve? There'd be 16, 18 grandchildren at Grand's house, and I swear she'd use 1 can of tomato soup and a whole bunch of oatmeal, and it was so good. And she always made bannock when we were there. One was raisin and one was plain, and that was our bread for the day. But that was my relatives, my cousins, all my cousins. They're not my cousins, those are my brothers and sisters at home. And so I know that we have to move back to those roots. And I know some of them are still struggling out there, but at least they know who they are. They're not feeling lost out there. And I think that we inherited, all of us, we have to be gentle with each other because we inherited a really broken system. A broken system that sees the downtown east side and in every other city, down Kamloops, we've seen some of them. And many of those children are our families. And what happens is we put them through these systems and we put them to 20, 30, 40 homes. And then the day after they turn 18, they enter extreme poverty, and they're disconnected from us, and they're disconnected from our families, and we lose them. And we want to stop that, because I always think, even though as a young person, if you go through that teen years or those early 20 years, and you go through that system, I think if you're with your family when you're young and you have those roots, you're always going to come back to your roots. You go a little bit because you're young and you think you know better. But I think if you have that strong upbringing that you're showing us here, that you're showing every First Nation community here how to come back to our roots, that I uplift you all, because I think the country needs to hear this. They have to see your declarations, that you're all taking a commitment to make better lives for your young ones. So I commend you all, and I commend your leadership, your council. They had me out on the land today, and I know that they're working on other things, land issues for you. And I think you're in very capable hands with all of you here, strong people. And I just lift you all up in a good way. And I'll close off on this. When I was 4 years old, my dad drove. We had no air conditioner, by the way, at the time. And we came here to meet with all the other tribes. And the tribes from across the country had wanted to meet because they were tired of, I think it was just before Oka, but it was at a time when First Nations were not being treated well in this country. And we're still not. I know we have a long way to go. But I remember us driving to this beautiful territory, and it was the first time I'd seen people openly sing and dance. And I was so proud of all of you, because back home where we were, we went in the bush, and we were shy to speak our language. We'd speak it very quietly. Those days are done, and we're going to move, and we're going to be stronger together. And so I know that there's this big agreement, $47.8 billion. I know that there's good things in there. At the 5-year mark, we have to have an analysis if it's working. At the 10-year mark, or 8-year mark, we also have to decide, are we going to proceed on with this, or do we change course at year 10? But I think that the status quo is not working, and that we have to give control back to First Nations people. And after that, I know I talked to all the premiers. The Prime Minister had asked me to come with him to Normandy, and there was like a big convoy of people, so they had like all the ministers. And for whatever reason, he was number one. I was the only Indigenous leader that he had asked to come for from Canada. And he put me in with all the premiers in one little van, a big van. So I think there was 10 of them in there and myself. So I said, hey boys, you're going to sign on to Jordan's principle. I said, because all those stuff affects people within your community, within your provinces, and on your land. I said, so we're going to have to work together on that. And they all agreed with me in that van that day. So I made them sign something, because I had them. So I'm going to hold them to that. And I think as we negotiate that program, that has a lot of flaws, because it just started. It has a lot of issues. So we're going to look to people like yourself, many of you in this room that are experts. Tell us what's wrong with that program. How do we fix it? And how do we make it better so that it lasts for a long time? I've also went to meet with Pierre Poilievre. I know that people can be fearful of change, and at the same time, the reality in Ottawa is I have to make sure I meet with every leader, because I want to make sure that you have open doors, that Chief has open doors, that we're building those relationships. And so my husband and I went to meet with Poilievre. We went to his house twice now, met his wife. She's big on human trafficking, and I talked to him about this issue on child welfare. He's pretty quiet about it. He did commit to a new relationship on policing with First Nations. He also committed to a new fiscal relationship with First Nations. And I'm going to continue to try and make sure that we build those relationships. I even went to all their Christmas parties just to make sure we're friends with everyone in this country, to make sure that when the chief calls me, that anybody who does become a minister down the way, that we have those doors open, that we build those relations. And I think that's what you all expect. And I'm going to continue to do that. I'll make sure no matter what, that I'm out there building those relations at First Nations, that you have a door there, that office at 50 O'Connor Street, right across from Parliament, that's your office. That's the First Nations office there. So we're there, we're open. I want to thank our staff for also joining. I know we got to go. Time is, I'm going to get, we got chiefs waiting, but, but thank you so much.
Cindy, the group has. Okay, we have a presentation for you. So we've got a quilt that we made. This quilt. It touched many hands, and so like our children, it takes a community to raise a child. It takes a community to put a quilt together. This quilt it has our logo right on the front there, and it's one of the quilts that we gift when we are doing our baby welcoming celebration. We have our next celebration on September the 14th, Saturday. Our baby welcoming celebration is supported also by Brockman Town Family Services and Okanagan Nation Alliance. There are two big allies, Brockman Town Family Services and Okanagan Nation Alliance. And so this is gifted to Cindy. It's a blanket, but it's also made so that she can hang it on her wall. Yeah, she can hang it on her wall. It has little pieces there because it's always a reminder that the work we do is not only for our children today, but it's for our children yet to be.
All right.